Working as a photographer often puts you in situations where you have to bring a ton of gear just to satisfy whatever location that you're in. Sometimes it's nice to have no flashes, oftentimes you'll need at least one, but in this video I want to go over my exact 2-light setup that I use every time I'm in a situation that absolutely needs it. Let's get into it. Hey everyone, welcome back. My name is Sergio and I'm a commercial photographer here in Victoria, BC. As some of you know, I shoot mostly still life and advertising, and one of my main gigs is shooting the Uber Eats restaurants here in town in Victoria. I'm very fortunate to have that contract, but it also puts me in so many different restaurants and different lighting scenarios and different times of day that I need to bring enough equipment in order to satisfy those different locations. Now, this may be specific to food and product and these restaurants that I'm in, but all of this knowledge is from doing all of the Airbnbs and all the hotel shoots with the different models that I had for almost a decade leading up to this. So this can be applied to any kind of shoot, whether you're outside, inside, in some dingy basement, wherever you may be, you'll end up being able to shoot some very consistent looking, high quality results. So the amount of lights that I bring out are often location dependent, and it's more on the amount of control that I want to have over a given situation. If you've seen any of my Learn to Light videos, you've seen that most of my shoots start with a perfectly black frame so that I can paint in my light exactly where I want it. So if I'm in a weird situation and I kill all of the ambient light by shooting at f11, 1/25th of a second, ISO 100, that'll probably kill most situations other than maybe midday sun outside. Now for this is where you have to really start using your brain and start thinking about the location that you're in. Oftentimes I'm shooting in restaurants that are actively open, and I have to be mindful of the amount of stands that I take out and the size of all of my modifiers and things like that, because there's still patrons in the restaurant, there's still people working and walking around. I need to be mindful of that. So what I do first is I'll take up my fill and I'll boom it either right above the food or right above the product or right above the person, whatever it may be, and I'll create a nice general fill from above that just kind of gives us a shadow slider in real time. I can choose the depth of my shadows, I can choose the depth of fill just by having a fill light at a certain ratio to my key light. We'll get into that in a sec, but I just want to make sure that I have a slightly, maybe 1 or 2 stop underexposed fill light. The reason I say it's location dependent is because I can bring out my 7-foot umbrella over here and I can grab a C-stand, boom it over the table and shoot it way up and make sure that there's a nice, clean, super even light on top of my product. But that's not always the most convenient way to do things, especially when you're in the corner of some restaurant with 7-foot ceilings and you're having a hard time even setting up your stands. Having 4 light stands and a bunch of tripods and things in the way can be very annoying. So instead of having a light like that, just look around. It might be location dependent, but let's say for me in my studio right now, I've got white ceilings. I wouldn't need an extra modifier because that ceiling is basically as big of a modifier as I can ask for by just shooting a flash into it and asking it to just fill out my general scene. I'm not looking for anything specific. I'm not looking for a very specific type of catch light or I'm just wanting to set my shadows at a certain level. Now I know I did a video on my favorite 1-light setup, and the reason this is a 2-light setup is because oftentimes when you're shooting in a location, if you're killing all that ambient light and you're only shooting with a single key light, that means your shadows are going to be 4 stops darker than that highlight. And that's going to be a huge level of contrast that you might not want. So by shooting with 2 lights, I can create a depth of that shadow at the level that I want it. If I don't want it to be a 4-stop shadow, I can make it a 3-stop shadow or a 2-stop shadow. And I can make it a little bit less contrasty and then re-add the contrast later in post if that's what I want. It's easier to have the detail in the shadows than just have crushed shadows and then have no room to bring them back if that's what you want later. Now, yeah, I'm sure I'm maybe a little bit lucky to have white ceilings in my studio, but I find that most places that you're going to be in are going to have a white ceiling. So look up before you start taking out too many light stands and too many modifiers and things like that, because honestly, you can probably even use a super clamp with a magic arm tied to the table, beaming to the ceiling, which is something I've done with my cart, actually. I've super clamped some modifiers to my cart because that's going to be with me anyway, and that way I have one less stand to bring, one less way to be in people's way. You got to think of it as the shadow that's being created from your key light is controlled by your fill light. It's not about making 2 different shadows that are competing with each other. It's creating a shadow and then filling in that same shadow with a certain amount of depth so that you can create a scene that looks flattering to you and to your clients. By using 2 lights, sure, it's more gear, it's more things to bring, it's a little bit, you got to be a little bit less lazy in order to do it. But with 2 lights, you can actually create an environment that wouldn't otherwise exist in real life. You're crushing that ambient light, and then you're telling the viewer where the light is coming from, how intense it's coming from, and in what type of characteristic it has, what type of quality that light has. You're hiding the second flash in the first one. That's a little bit of the mind trick that I want you to take. So hopefully I've got a few behind the scenes videos for you guys to actually understand what it is I'm talking about. But what I like to bring are these 7-foot to-go stands from Strobe Pro. I know Manfrotto also makes these. They're just a little bit more expensive. But I've had these for a minute, and I quite like how these are super lightweight and they're super small, and they actually even fit in a carry-on bag. They are a great companion for these on-the-go small little shoots. 2 of these, a reflector like this as my key light, and having either one of the big softbox or the strip box that you see in the background as one of my fill lights. And together, I can transform any restaurant, I can transform any scene that's at least relatively indoors, and I can make something that didn't exist before. I can create something completely from scratch that only exists in my head, and I can control those shadows so much more, and I can control the look, the aesthetic, the feel so much more by using 2 lights instead of just 1. And in my video from last year, I'm complaining about being too lazy and not wanting to bring too much equipment with me. And by using just these smaller, lighter stands and not necessarily my 600 lights and just my 200 lights, the smaller lights, smaller things to bring, I'm able to just have a backpack and a carry bag with my stands and my tripod, and I can walk into pretty much any restaurant, any location, and create a completely transformative look for whatever product that's in front of me, whether that's a person, a restaurant, table, a plate of food is what I meant to say, a product, candles, whatever it may be. So hopefully you guys take this for your next shoot, maybe try it out for yourselves. Leave a like if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you in a couple days. Later.